Well, in his book, What Good is God?, author Philip Yancey tells the story about the 2004 Ukrainian elections. Now, I don't know if you follow international politics, but in 2004, there was an amazing thing that happened in Ukraine. It just, well, let me tell you about it. Yancey wrote about it, and he told about the reformer, Viktor Yushchenko, who had challenged the entrenched political party that was in power. And the polls were saying that Yushchenko was ahead comfortably and that likely he would win this election. It would be a reformed candidate who would bring some change, and people were looking for that kind of change. Well, on the evening of the election, the state-run television reported a different story. It was quite interesting. So, the state-run television announcer said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we announce that the challenger Viktor Yushchenko has been decisively defeated." Well, Yancey writes that the government authorities had not taken into account when they made that announcement that there was a little problem in saying what wasn't true over television. Because down in the corner of the television was a woman who was telling the audience in sign language what was actually going on. So on that small screen insert in the right-hand corner of the television, Yancey writes, this brave woman told the truth about what was actually happening that day. And she said these words in sign language: "I'm addressing all the deaf citizens of Ukraine. Don't believe what they say. They, the announcers, the government, are lying. And I'm ashamed to translate these lies. Yushchenko is our president." No one in the studio then understood how radical her message was at that moment. Well, inspired by that, deaf people all over Ukraine led what was called the Orange Revolution. They began to text their friends and family members and say, "Hey, we just got the word. What they're telling us on television is not true. They've literally stolen the election." So Philip Yancey goes on to write these words. He says they text messaged their friends on mobile phones about the fraudulent elections, and soon other journalists took courage and likewise refused to broadcast the party line. Over the next few weeks, as many as 1 million people wearing orange flooded the capital city of Kiev to demand new elections. The government finally buckled under the pressure, consenting to new elections, and this time Viktor Yushchenko emerged as the clear winner of the election. And then Yancey makes this point. He says our society is hardly unique. Like the sign language translator in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, along comes a person named Jesus, who says, in effect, to the world, don't believe the big screen. They're lying. It's the poor who are blessed, not the rich. Mourners are blessed too, as well as those who hunger and thirst, and the persecuted. And those who go through life thinking they're on top will end up on the bottom. And those who go through life feeling they're at the very bottom will end up on top. After all, what does it profit a person to gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Staggering. Staggering. And so, we've been looking at the life of Jesus Christ and how 2,000 years ago He stepped into time with a body in flesh and began to speak to us, began to show us what God wanted, show us the heart of God, the compassion of God, the grace of God. And He entered into that culture in Jerusalem and Galilee and began to challenge the status quo. He challenged what was being said, and He began to preach the gospel of the kingdom. Now, the country at that time was under the iron fist of Rome. It was a harsh time, a difficult political time. It was hard economically. It was hard spiritually. It was very difficult for everybody. And Jesus stepped into the scene and He said, don't believe what you hear. I say to you this. I say to you that. And over in the preaching and teaching ministry of Jesus, you will hear him say, they say, but I say. And he was telling us exactly what God the Father wanted us to hear, right straight from his mouth. And so Jesus was telling the people of Galilee, the poor, the disenfranchised, the religious, the political. He was telling everybody the same thing, but not everybody heard it. And in the passage today, we're going to see where Jesus calls us to glory. He calls us to glory. And he says there's a path that I want you as my followers to engage with. I want you to find this path. I have some requirements for you. And I have some reasons for those requirements. I've called you to glory, and I want you to see the path that you need to walk as a disciple, but I also want you to see the promises that I'm giving to you. Because if you'll understand the promises, it will help you deal with the path that I'm calling you to. So if you will, take your Bibles and go with me to Matthew chapter 16. Jesus is well into his ministry, and he has just dealt with Peter saying, oh Lord, you can't go to the cross. And Jesus rebuked him and said, get behind me, Satan. You need to know, Peter, what's ahead. And what was ahead was the cross. Peter didn't like that part. None of us like that part. But Jesus then turns and says to his disciples, not to the crowd, but to his disciples, to those that were following him most closely. He says to his disciples, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own life? And what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For the Son of Man will come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he will reward each according to his works. Assuredly, I say to you, there are some standing here who shall not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. So Jesus is making very plain to his disciples. This is an inside word. This is a call to those who say they are his disciples, to those who say they are his close followers. And it's a message to us today who say we're followers of Jesus, who say we're Christians, who say we affiliate with Christ. It is a challenge to us to understand that he has called us to glory. And in calling us to glory, he says right now, here and now, where you live, as you live out your life here on this present earth, in this present moment in time, there's a path for you. And that path has requirements, and those requirements involve 3 basic commitments. And then Jesus will turn and said, I'm going to give you 2 reasons why those 3 commitments are incredibly essential. And then he will shift from describing the path that he's called us to, and he'll start talking more about the promises that motivate us to stay on that path. And so, Jesus has come to call us to the glory of a new kingdom, to the restoration of all things, to the restoration of body and soul. When Jesus was going about his ministry, he was constantly dealing with people who were broken in body and soul. And he still does engage the broken and the beat up and the browbeaten in body and soul. And today, Jesus is going to show us a contrast. And he's saying, contrary to what your world is telling you, contrary to what your social media is telling you, contrary to what your friends or your family is saying to you about what matters, I'm telling you, I have called you, if indeed you are my disciple, I'm calling you on a path to glory, to the restoration of all things. This was a promise that goes back to the Garden of Eden when God said, I will restore you. Body and soul. Now, we often think about heaven as a place where we kind of float around like a bunch of redeemed souls, but the promise is restored body and soul on a restored earth and a restored heaven. All brand new. That's the call. So Jesus here, though, is going to challenge us. So let's talk about this call to glory and how that call reveals a path. So there are three requirements. Those requirements are essential. You, as a believer, have commitments to make in response to your salvation. Here's the first. He says to his disciples, if anyone desires to be my follower, my adherent, my disciple, if you claim to know me, if you claim, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, then this is what I'm telling you. It's not easy. He says, if you want to come after me, if you want to follow me on the path to glory, to the restored kingdom, then you need to, first of all, deny yourself. Deny yourself. Now, that's not something we like. The commitment is to deny yourself, to say, Jesus, I really like my throne here. I don't really want to get off my throne because I like my self-interest, but because you have called me on the path of glory, I want to step off the throne of my life. I want you to be the Lord of everything in my life. My choices, my thoughts, my desires, my loves, all of that. And so I give up my reliance on what I say, well, that's just me, my personality. This is the way I am. Jesus is saying, give it up. Because we often resort to this fallback and go, well, I can't help it. That's just the way I am. This is what I like. This is what I want. And Jesus is saying, disown yourself. You may say, this is what I desire above all things. He says, give it up. Deny it. Disown it. Walk away from it. Stop promoting your own self-interest. Desire what Jesus wants for you. Then embrace the cause of promoting the glory of God. If you're on the path of glory, to the kingdom of glory, to the God of glory, He's challenging us then to promote that glory first, not my particular glory. I want His reputation enhanced in my life. I want His reputation noticed. And so I realize the things that I personally want. I'm willing to disown those things. I understand who I am by nature, by my sin nature. I realize there's only one rescue, and that is Jesus. And so Jesus, rescue me and restore me to the place of my creation, where you want me to be. Second commitment is a commitment to take up your cross of suffering. Look at the next phrase. Let him deny himself and take up his cross, and we'll get to the follow me part in just a moment. It is a commitment to take up a cross of suffering. Every one of us has been given a cross of suffering. If you follow Jesus, somebody, sometime, somewhere will not like it. They will not be comfortable with you. They will not like what you stand for. They will not like the change in your life, the way you think, the way you act, how you prioritize your interests, your desires, your entertainments, your friends, your hobbies, whatever. They won't like it. And somebody is going to sandpaper you for it. Jesus is saying, well, that's part of the commitment you're going to have to make if you truly follow me. It's a choice that you have to make. I want to take you to Galatians chapter 2. And here Paul describes what this commitment to suffering looks like. In Galatians chapter 2, verse 20, it's an amazing passage. He says, I've been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave Himself for me. That's my life now. I'm crucified with Christ. I followed Him to the cross. Now, when Jesus says, follow me to the cross, you take up your cross, you see this picture. Jesus has just explained to Peter, Peter, I've got to die. Peter said, no, that's not the way I want the story to end. I want you to go straight to power so I can be part of the power club. I want to be part of the A-team. I don't want to go to that suffering part. Jesus is saying, you get your cross like I have my cross. You follow me to Golgotha. You follow me to the place of self-sacrifice. You follow me to the place where you give up everything for the kingdom. You give up everything for this path to glory. You give up everything because you know the restoration of all things is coming. And so you may be subject to insult. You may be subject to ridicule. And there are brothers and sisters in our faith all around the world who are literally living this principle out as we speak. They are dying for their faith. They are losing their jobs and their homes and their kids because they have picked up their cross and they're following Jesus. This is a painful response, if you will. But then, I want you to go over to 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 21. For to this you were called, because Christ suffered for us, leaving us an example that you should follow in His steps. There's a constant awareness in the life of a disciple that to serve other people is a sacrifice. It's a burden at times. You give up prestige. You give up other things to serve. There are many of you here today. You could be serving in a bigger church, maybe a different kind of church. You could be doing other things, but you sense the call of God to be right here in this place, using your gifts here, right now. This is the place of service. But sometimes your place of serving is not always easy. But then Jesus gives us something else. Look back with me in Matthew chapter 16. He says, not only deny yourself, take up your cross of sacrificial service. It's a burden, but I'm going to be there with you in this. And then he says, and follow me. What's interesting in the text is that the deny word and take up your cross word are kind of once and for all decisions. You make these commitments and then you move on. You disown yourself. You get yourself off the throne of your life, out of being center place in your thinking, and you take up a cross and say, I'm going in the direction of Jesus. But then this third imperative, to follow, is a present tense. And it's saying this is something you do daily. You're making this daily commitment to follow Jesus. It's a fascinating commitment. So it's here where I get up every morning and I say, so Lord, what does a disciple look like today? Lord, how can I live out my life as a follower as I'm heading to work, as I'm getting through traffic, as I'm interacting with my coworkers, as I deal with my family? How does a disciple talk? How does a disciple react? How does a follower of you live out the principles of Jesus? And so I walk in Christ's footsteps. And I realize that part of my ministry during the day will be preaching and teaching and healing and helping and ministering. Jesus was on a mission of mercy. I'm called to a mission of mercy. So I interact with the people and I say, Jesus, how can I show mercy today? How can I show compassion? How can I help the broken? How can I interact with the fractured lives that are going to intersect my own life today? How can I tell my story? See, as a follower of Christ, as someone who's been redeemed from sin, you have a story. Every one of us has a story. And coming together as a group of believers is not about coming together and sharing our perfection. It's not about coming together and say, I've lived a pretty clean life here. I mean, I've walked it. I'm really grateful for the very few mistakes I've made in my life. Well, you won't be comfortable around here. Because we're a group of people who know we've been broken. We know we've been disappointed. We know we're fractured in body and mind. And we know those things. We're clear about those things. And we're grateful that those things have brought us to the Lord's grace. And that He heals us. And He is healing us. And He will heal us. Because we know that ultimately we're going to be completely restored in mind and body. That's coming. So, as I follow Christ, I'm just going to trust Him. I get up in the morning and I say, Lord, I don't know where this day's going, but I trust You with it. And when the day is over, I say, whew, Lord, I didn't see that one coming, but I still trust You. I walk in His footsteps. I walk in the footsteps of mercy. I look at His Word and say, Jesus, I don't really get that. I don't know if I totally understand that, but if You'll explain that, I'll do that. And we suffer when we're called upon. This is one of the things that trips so many followers of Jesus. Because they say, well, if anything happens, God's being mean to me. And we actually get offended. A lot of Christians live in a constant state of offense, They're always offended. Well, why did that happen? Why did this happen? I didn't ask for that. God knew I was going to have a picnic today, and why did He let it rain on my picnic? It's your path of suffering sometimes. But it rains on the picnics of the just and the unjust, the saved and the unsaved, believers and unbelievers. But He is saying what is important is not your perfect picnic, but that you follow me. If I ask you to suffer, you'll suffer. We as Americans don't have a clue what our brethren around the world are going through in the level of suffering and doing without, in suffering body and mind and spirit, what they are living through, imprisonment and deprivations economically and socially. It is a reality for our brothers and sisters around the world, and it may become a reality in this country before we know it. And then the question will be, what are you going to do? What are you going to do if you suffer? If you say, it's not right that I get cancer. It's not right that I break a leg. It's not right that I lose a job. It's not fair if this happens to me. It's not fair. Oh, we like to bring that up. Well, everything's fair. It's just, Jesus is saying, if you're going to follow me, you're going to follow me into suffering. It's a reality. Well, Pastor Tim Keller, in his conversations about Christmas, I think gives this incredibly important insight. He says, I've heard people say, I'm checking out Christianity, but I also understand Christians can't do this, and the Bible says you're supposed to do that, and you're supposed to love the poor, and you're supposed to give up sex outside of marriage. I can't accept that. So people want to come to Christ with a list of conditions, he says. But the real question is this. Now think about this question. Tim Keller, I think he fine-tunes this question quite well. Is there a God who is the source of all beauty and glory and life, and if knowing Christ will fill your life with His goodness and power and joy, so that you would live with Him in endless ages, with His life increasing in you every day? If that's true, you wouldn't say things like, you may not have to give up, fill in the blank. Let's say you have a friend who's dying of some terrible disease. So you take him to the doctor, and the doctor says, I have a remedy for you. If you'll just follow my advice, you'll be healed, and you will live a long and fruitful life. But there is only one problem. While you're taking my remedy, you can't eat chocolate. Okay. Now, what if your friend turned to you and said, forget it? No chocolate? Oh, what's the use of living? I'll follow the doctor's remedy, but I will also keep eating chocolate. Really? So, Keller comes back to this question. If Christ is really God, then all the conditions are gone. To know Jesus Christ is to say, Lord, anywhere your will touches my life, anywhere your word speaks, I will say, Lord, I will obey. There are no conditions anymore. If He's really God, He can't just be a supplement. And that's the way we like Jesus often. I want Him to be a supplement. That I can reach up in my spiritual shelf and I go, I need a supplement today. I need a little get up and go today. I need a little supernatural spice today. So I'm going to open my cabinet and pull out a little Jesus. Let's see, I'll take 2 or 3 Jesus today and put that in my life and move on and go, whew, man, I got invigorated today. I got a little power in my life today because I got a little Jesus. Jesus is not my vitamin supplement. I don't make conditions on God and say, hey, if you can meet my conditions, Jesus, you and me, we are tight. It doesn't work that way. Well, from those requirements that involve those three commitments to deny yourself, take up your cross, and actively follow Jesus, He gives us the reasons why those requirements are so essential. Look with me at verse 26. For, in light of, in response to what I've just said, what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? And what will a man give in exchange for his soul? Now you've noticed, if you're following the translation I'm using, the New King James Version, he translates 2 words. You got life shows up twice and soul turns up twice. But in the text, those 4 words are the same Greek word, psyche. We get our word psychology from this word. But in the first 2 instances, in verse 25, he's talking about your earthly, physical life. So what's the problem here, he says? If you want to save this present life, well, you're going to lose it. But if you want to gain everything, well, there's a different way to do that. So Jesus is telling us, here's the first reason why these commitments are important. If you pursue the world's acceptance, you will lose your life. You'll lose it. You're going to turn inward or you're going to turn outward. If you turn inward, it's all about me, it's all for me, then you're going to impoverish your soul. And you're going to impoverish your very life. You'll say things like, well, hey, it is all about me, and I know God wants me to be happy, and since this is what makes me happy, then that's what I'm going to do, and I'm sure God understands that this is what makes me happy, and that's what I'm going to pursue. And Jesus is saying, then you will surely lose your life. Because it has nothing to do with the will of God or the Word of God or what Christ calls us to. It's about, I want this, I'll have this, get out of my way, or be a part of it. It's selfishness or selflessness. When you turn outward toward others, giving mercy and compassion like Christ has done in His ministry. When you think about those who turn inward, think of Judas Iscariot, who said, I just can't get it. I don't want it this way. I don't want Jesus this way. I don't want to live this way. I'm going to sell out. And he did. And he lost his life. When you think about the Good Samaritan who came by and saw a guy in tremendous trouble, and he said, I'll lose my life for this. I'll give up my life for this. I'll show an act of mercy for this. And he did. So Jesus is saying the pursuit of the world's acceptance involves the loss of life. But then he goes on to say in verse 26, for what profit is it to a man who gains the whole world and loses his own psyche? Here he's not talking about physical life. He's talking about your transcendent life. Or what will a man give in exchange for his transcendent, eternal soul? What are you willing to sell out for? To have what you want right now, right here, with whomever, with whatever it might be. You want a hit, you want a reprieve. What are you willing to sell out? Your soul, your transcendent soul. You think, well, I'm just giving up something bodily right now. But Jesus says, oh, no, the stakes are way higher. We're talking about your transcendent soul. You think you control your body, and to a certain extent you do. But you have a soul to think about. What is the worth of your soul? And that is a challenging question. When you see what your soul is, the seat of your emotions, it's the place where everything happens. You are a soul, you have a body, but in eternity you will have a soul and you will have a body. But Jesus is saying here, you need to save your soul, wait for your redeemed body. It's going to come in the right order, but don't give up your soul for right now. I mean, how many people do you know that have given up their physical life because they needed a hit? They needed a drug. They got caught up into something. They got entangled by something or someone. And Jesus is saying, there's more to this. Look with me at the latter part of this verse. And what will a man give in exchange for his soul? The great exchange. What's it worth to you? What is it worth? If you are selfish, your soul contracts. If you are selfless, your soul expands. And you contract because you seek your own comfort or your own prestige. And you say, for a momentary acceptance, I want social media to love me. I want to be their darling. I want my friends to think I'm it. I'm all that. I want people to notice me. I want this moment. I want to shine in my 15 minutes of glory. And he says, get it. Jump right into it. Get as much of that as you can. But also understand, for all that you get, you lose everything. What is your soul worth? Well, there was a study done. The U.S. government's Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, uses a study to sort of appraise the value of a human soul. They call it VSL, or Value of a Statistical Life. And they determine the worth of your soul. The current VSL for a human right now is 7.4 million in 2006 and about 8.6 million in 2013. So let's take that $8 million. Let's say you're worth $8 million and you will sell your soul for a $20 hit. What a fool. What a tragedy. What a loss. You take your $8 million soul and you trade it for fill in the blank. What a tragedy. Because you want a momentary hit of comfort, release, or peace, or ease, and you'll sell out your testimony. You'll sell out Christ because you want somebody to think you're it. Somebody will think you are socially aware. You're politically correct. And so you sell out everything for that. Well, I've got to move on quickly because in verse 27, for the Son of Man will come in the glory of His Father with His angels, and then He'll reward each one according to his works. So He moves us from the call to glory through the path of commitments to this promise that He's making to those of us who are following Him. He's telling us Messiah is going to return. The Son of Man will come in the glory of His Father. I'm calling you into the path of glory so that you receive the Christ of glory, enter into the kingdom of glory. I'm coming back. This is your motivation. Everybody around you selling out, don't sell out. Why? There's a great value in following me because I'm coming in glory with angels. That's pretty cool. That'll work. I want to see that. So I'd rather see that than get somebody's approval. I'd rather experience that than to be whatever. I'm willing to endure my physical pain, my spiritual pain, my mental pain for that. That's awesome. So Messiah will return in glory to establish His kingdom. Messiah will reward His kingdom followers. Look at this, He says, and then He will reward each according to his works. It may not show up now, what I'm doing or not doing, but it will show up there. There's going to be a reward, and then He's going to reveal His glory. Now, He said, some of you are not going to taste death till you see the Son of Man coming. And what happens in chapter 17? The Transfiguration, where Jesus does reveal His glory to some of His disciples. It's an amazing thing, but there is way more to come. I want to take you quickly to 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 16, where Peter writes, Peter was one who saw the Transfiguration. He heard Jesus call to His disciples. He's the one who blew it and saying, Jesus, you can't go to the cross. And Peter writes, for we did not follow cunningly devised fables when we made known to you the power and coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, but were eyewitnesses of His majesty. For we received from God the Father honor and glory when such a voice came to Him from the excellent glory. This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. And we heard this voice which came from heaven when we were with Him on the holy mountain. Meaning we experienced His glory. And we're telling you, hang in there, persecuted people. Hang in there, broken and bruised. Hang in there. Because there's glory coming. He's called you to the path of glory. And it's going to hurt right now. But it's going to be glorious very, very soon. So, Mission Network News gives us an account of an organization called Asian Access, or A2. It's a Christian mission agency in Southeast Asia. And they list some questions that church planters ask of new believers before they get baptized. Now, here in the United States, if you say, hey, I got saved, all right, hallelujah, and I want to be baptized. We go, all right, fine, let's get a baptism. And we set it up, and we're all good with that as soon as possible. Well, that's not so quick in other places of the world because of their suffering. So, due to safety concerns, Asian Access doesn't mention the country's name that I'm about to talk about. But they ask believers a series of questions who want to be baptized. The country's predominantly Hindu, but over the last few decades, this article says, a lot of people become Christians. And so they ask the poor and the tribal people who are coming to Christ, they ask them this series of 7 questions. And they say, This is what they might experience if they decide to go public with baptism. Number one, are you willing to leave home and lose the blessing of your father? Number two, are you willing to lose your job? Number three, are you willing to go to the village and those who persecute you, forgive them, and share the love of Christ with them? Number four, are you willing to give an offering to the Lord? Number five, are you willing to be beaten rather than deny your faith? Number six, are you willing to go to prison? Number seven, are you willing to die with Jesus? And this is a very important question. For every Christian on every continent has to face this. So Jesus is standing in the corner of our culture and he's saying, time out. Don't believe what they're saying. Don't believe what they're telling you at university. Don't believe what they're telling you maybe in your church. You need to listen to me and I will tell you the truth. I am the way and the truth and the life. Listen to me. I'll show you how to find fulfillment. I'll show you how to find wholeness and peace and joy. Follow me. Don't follow them. They're lying to you. I want to lead you on a path to glory, to the restoration of all things. That's what he promises us. The question is, am I willing to truly be a disciple of Christ? And he's challenging us in this text. He's saying, get on, get off, or get out of the way. He doesn't coddle us. He's calling us and saying, what I have for you is so awesome, you need to give up the toys and get ready for the glory. Give up your pennies and get ready for the gold. Give this up and focus on what is to come, to the call of glory. Would you join me in prayer?